Well, here we are outside the court, and today, of course, was quite an interesting day. Chris Robertshaw is going to be joining us because we're both sitting in the court. It was the Dr Ranson court when they're putting all the submissions in, weren't they, basically, ahead of which will be an appeal tomorrow. And we can talk about in open court what went on, try not to stray into other areas which might affect the outcome tomorrow. But your thoughts? I mean, this was quite jaw-dropping in places, wasn't it, to hear what was being put forward. What they're arguing against. This is the Department of Health and Social Care, isn't it? Arguing against not going ahead next week with the tribunal.
First of all, I think it's right to say that it was encouraging to see the level of public interest this morning. The public gallery was full, so I think there's a keen interest from a number of people who understand how important this is. That's the first point. The number of this morning, I think, was revolved, as I understood it, as a member of the public, around whether or not the tribunal was entitled to conduct a hearing of its own volition on the veracity, accuracy, and non-submissions of documents. From, again, my understanding, the department's case was quite extraordinary in the sense that the department argued that the proposed hearing was actually something a lot deeper and a lot broader than the tribunal had actually said was the case. In other words, the department was saying this was a full-blown investigation airing on a public inquiry, when in fact my understanding from the tribunal's position is that they want to consider these matters as it relates to the final part of the tribunal's work, which is the ultimate settlement. In other words, the awards to be granted. That's the nub of it. The department appeared to be anxious not to delay matters, and yet everything that they said and did this morning suggested that was exactly what they were trying to do. So our last discussion on this touched on the issue of concern about cynical behaviour on the part of the department, which I think we're seeing writ large now. There was a somewhat amusing element which highlighted this perhaps better than anything else, and that was where the DHSC representative said effectively, well, you know, we can't be ready for various reasons, and she argued why that might be the case. And yet, but also said that, well, actually, Dr Ranson wasn't ready either, and immediately there was a submission from Dr Rosalind's side to say, well, no, we have nothing more to submit, and we are ready. So, frankly, the impression given was that the department are desperately scratching around, looking for technicalities wherever they can to delay, to confuse, to obfuscate the whole matter. And as I think I said to you from the get-go, Paul, I think we've had 4 interviews on this now, haven't we? The first one, once the judgment of the tribunal was known, I said it is not in the interests of the government to take this to appeal. They didn't, and now they're sort of floundering around looking for technical hooks.
It looks like, and this is what we had already sort of surfaced, that the AG's department had agreed terms and everything was going ahead, and then very last minute they put this roadblock, or attempted roadblock, not to go ahead next week, and put it off until January or something. And they've employed this company that's going to look deeply into the metadata, and it's going to say how much that's going to cost. That's because this company is obviously there to try and put a bit of change of views maybe on what was already said.
Let's look at the dates on this. The tribunal judgment came out in May, and yet here we are, and we're just on the cusp of the tribunal's hearing next week, early next week, and yet here we have the department rushing in at the last minute, trying to throw up what I would only call class as chaff, really. You know, when an aircraft is
I know what chaff is,
Yeah.
World War II stuff and
Well,
deflecting.
the rocket.
Yes, trying to find another target, basically.
It looks like that.
It does
really
to a lot of people, and the fact is, this is going to cost the government and the taxpayer a lot of money. How can Laurie Hooper sit with this one now? That at the end of the day, it's his department that's authorised this action, isn't it? Presumably. I mean, the AG's department seems to be conflicted. They've now brought in a new lawyer, which
Laurie Hooper must be fully acquainted with the terms of this submission. And to me, as I've just tried to describe, it makes no sense at all. It's built on an assumption of an action that the DHSC believe the tribunal wants to take when they've stated nothing of the sort. It's quite extraordinary.
Packed courthouse, massive interest, more media there than I've seen so far doing anything on the story, because we've been talking about it for some time. Is it for the Chief Minister to stop this in its tracks? Do you think it's still got time to say, let's just get this on, let's get it out of the way and clear things out? Because clearly,
I think it's got to take its course now.
There are people who are going to be presumably in the spotlight, and it all seems to, and it is just my impression that this whole amount of money that's being thrown at it now is to try and stop people being named and shamed.
I think the public are already coming to that conclusion, and rightly so. And I think it's foolish on the part of government to continue the process of just trying to find a way out of the situation. Coming back to your earlier point, following the judgment of the tribunal, consent for what was to happen next was agreed by both parties.
Indeed, that's what's so confusing about this, because it was going to go ahead.
And yet here we are at the last minute and throwing up these...
Well, there's one, as the Deemster said, there's one working day. Tomorrow's Friday, there's going to be the appeal. And he's found room in his diary because it's clear that the DHSC representatives did not expect tomorrow to be picked. They were looking much later on, if not, January for anything to happen. The Deemster seemed very keen that this would be heard tomorrow,
yes,
and a judgment made. So the thing next week, which will be Tuesday, it's the first working day next week, isn't it, after the bank holiday?
Yes.
That tribunal can go ahead by looks at it.
Indeed, and it seemed to both of us, as observers from the public gallery, that the Deemster One was anxious to bring this to a conclusion so that the tribunal could continue with its work. But we can't prejudge what will be said tomorrow.
Indeed. It doesn't sit well with many people, and certainly the way it's playing out looks like, and again it's just my personal opinion, I'm not making any judgments because that's for the court to do, but this looks like somebody somewhere is trying to stop things. It's almost like a Watergate in the Isle of Man, isn't it? Do you think that they're that close to naming people, and something at the last minute has been put up, and it's the taxpayer, I keep going back to that, the taxpayers are paying for this. Instead of getting on with healthcare, the DHSC is spending money out of their, presumably, pot on this sort of litigation, or the attempted stalling of the potential outcome to this whole case.
I just wonder whether the government fully understand the damage they're doing to themselves in the public mind by behaving in this fashion. They accepted the original tribunal judgment, they consented to the process, they clearly did not want to appeal, they didn't appeal within the requisite time, and here they are shamefully scratching around in Deemster One's court trying to magic up a reason as to why there should be a delay, at the same time as saying, well, we have no wish to delay anything. It's contemptible. Just
didn't play right to the people, and certainly the Deemster wasn't buying into that. Clearly,
we mustn't prejudge.
I'm saying about because he's going ahead with having the appeal tomorrow, so he wasn't going to be put off with this idea, and that was the main thrust. Was it mustn't happen next week. This tribunal should not be sitting because they've gone outside their remit, blah blah blah, all those sort of things. But the Deemster was no, we're going to hear this tomorrow, and we'll therefore potentially the thing will happen next week.
Well, I didn't reply to one of your points earlier on when you said that the DHSC had gone out to a detective agency to have a look further into the matter of the documentary submission,
which is obviously a massive piece of.
But of course, as the Deemster One said, this has been commissioned by the DHSC. The judgment was in May. When was the detective agency commissioned? And I understand, I hope my recollection is correct here, that didn't happen till the end of July, a few days ago. And so it hung in the air the question, well, why on earth, if they were going to do this, didn't they do it a lot earlier? So clearly, it's all obfuscation and delay, and shame on them, in my opinion, as a member of the board.